Armstrong Center for Teaching and Learning presents the Summer Fellowship of Flipped and Blended Learning.
Keeping up with all the trends and innovations in education can be pretty overwhelming, especially when you have so much to do already. You have to plan and create courses. You have to teach those courses. There's mandatory meetings to go to. Students expect their grades. You have to read and write to keep up with your content area. There's research to be done. If you have any time at all, you try to go to conferences, but that requires travel. And worst of all, you're expected to keep up with all of these buzzwords. It can get a little overwhelming. Well, it's pretty crowded in here, guys, so I'm gonna take off. See you soon. Okay, so it's a lot less crowded in here. As we saw, there's a lot of educational jargon, theories, and concepts to keep up with. In this video, we're going to sift through some of that information and focus on introducing flipped learning and exactly what that means. Let's start by looking at the learning outcomes. At the end of this video, you're going to be able to identify what flipped learning is. You'll be able to differentiate between the role of a traditional teacher and a flipped teacher. You're also going to be able to analyze the 4 pillars of flipped learning. These are put together by the Flipped Learning Network. It's a great resource we'll learn about later.
So what exactly is flipped instruction? EDUCAUSE, a nonprofit association whose mission is to advance higher education, states that the flipped classroom is a pedagogical model in which the typical lecture and homework elements of a course are reversed. Short video lectures are viewed by students at home before the class session, while in-class time is devoted to exercises, projects, or discussions. Jonathan Bergman, the co-founder of the Flipped Learning Network, has stated that ultimately it is not about flipping the when and where instruction is delivered. Although that is part of it, it's about flipping the attention away from the teacher and toward the learner. It is about eliminating large group direct instruction and meeting the individual learning needs of each student. So let's look at a modern day classroom. Here you are, teaching your heart out, filling young, content-thirsty minds with sweet, glorious knowledge. And what are your students doing? On their cell phones, texting, tweeting, and posting about everything in the world besides your class. But don't worry, these students will all still expect a Gold Star A at the end of the semester. What if we took our teaching style and revamped it? What if instead of fighting technology, we embraced it? What's broken isn't our lectures, it's our delivery. We could digitize our lectures and let students view them the way they want to. This opens the door for endless review and remediation with a solid scripted lesson that you are confident addresses all of the necessary content. Let's look at some advantages of recording your lectures. Eliminate student excuses when they miss class. I know it is extremely rare for a student to miss a class, but if they do, they can now see your lectures online. Students can no longer say that they didn't get any of the material. Material is ready to transform into an online or blended course at any time. More and more classes are moving to online and blended platforms. You don't want to not be ready if you're called on for this task. Digitizing your content makes sure you're not only staying current, but ahead of the trend. It lets you build an archive of self-made digital resources that improve your market value and justify your necessity. One of the largest worries of courses moving to online platforms is making instructors obsolete. This is a complete myth if we do it the right way. If we establish a presence with our own material, then we are making ourselves even more essential. Plus, it gives you an opportunity to showcase just how awesome you are and adds a level of accountability that assures you always make the courses the best they can be. So let's examine this even further by looking at exactly what the professor and students are doing in a traditional classroom. We see the professor is teaching alone. The student is learning alone. This style of teaching is often referred to as sage on the stage. I know you guys have heard that before. Well, we've kind of progressed past that, and we've changed this formula a little bit and kind of threw it out the window. Instead, the teacher's still teaching, but we have the students working more collaboratively, and they're kind of doing bigger projects and more career prep type stuff. Flipped learning lets us look at a whole new class structure. Because we've digitized our content delivery and students have viewed the content on their own time, the professor can now be more helpful in the learning process. This new structure allows the professor to provide extra support for students in need and assesses learning while it is happening versus the traditional method of assessing learning after it's happened. This is often referred to as moving from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. I know this sounds like a lot of work and you may not know where to begin to create this new structure, but as we progress, we will learn with more detail how to set up this format. There are many tools out there to help us have success at implementing flipped learning. The Flipped Learning Network has created 4 pillars of flipped learning that the research supports to be absolutely essential in having a successful flipped classroom. We're going to briefly examine each pillar, but we'll explore each one of them in more detail later. The first is a flexible environment. Educators create flexible spaces where students choose when and where they learn. Additionally, educators who flip their classes are flexible in their expectations of student timelines for learning and in their assessments of student learning. Next is learning culture. In a flipped learning model, in-class time is dedicated to exploring topics in greater depth and creating rich learning opportunities. As a result, students are actively involved in knowledge construction as they participate in and evaluate their learning in a manner that is personally meaningful. Intentional content. Flipped learning educators determine what they need to teach and what material students should handle on their own. Educators use intentional content to maximize classroom time in order to adopt methods of student-centered, active learning strategies, depending on the grade level and subject matter, of course. The role of a professional educator is even more important and often more demanding in a flipped classroom than in a traditional one. During class time, they need to observe students, providing them with instant feedback and an assessment of their work. While professional educators take on less visibly prominent roles in a flipped classroom, they remain the essential part that enables flipped learning to occur successfully. Let's look at some traditional definitions of the flipped classroom. A flipped classroom is where videos take the place of direct instruction. A flipped classroom is where students get individual time in class to work with their professor on key learning activities. A flipped class is a course where students who are absent don't get left behind. It is called the flipped class because what used to be classwork, the lecture, is now done at home via teacher-created videos, and what used to be homework, assigned problems, is now done in class.
Well, that concludes our introduction to flipped learning. There are 2 things I want you to have for our next meeting. The first is a video critique. Take a sheet of paper, put your name on it, write down 1 thing I can do to improve this video. As soon as you arrive at our meeting, turn it into the yellow folder at the front of the room. The second thing is write your own definition of flipped learning. This you're going to hold on to because you're going to discuss it with your colleagues. Take care. See you next time.